The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Well, even if you are not a sports fan, we have had a very interesting and I would argue very important event take place in the last 24 hours. The NBA's Jason Collins, who played with the Boston Celtics, the Washington Wizards this season, and is now a free agent, has disclosed that he is gay, making him the first openly gay male athlete in the 4 major American pro team sports. He is a center. He is now a free agent, like I mentioned, and he said this in a column which appears in the upcoming issue of Sports Illustrated. And he wrote that the killing of 3 people at the Boston Marathon actually persuaded him to make this announcement, saying things can change in a moment. Why not start living more truthfully? That's what he wrote in Sports Illustrated. And the managing editor of Sports Illustrated, Chris Stone, said that Collins was kind of reticent about coming out first, being the first of what we know, Lewis, intuitively, and we've heard from others, at least several players, we don't know how many, who are currently playing in the 4 major team sports and are gay.
Unlike what Phil Jackson said, that they do exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He said, Chris Stone, the managing editor of Sports Illustrated, said, it is a much simpler, more personal reason. He wants to have a family. He wants the same life that his twin brother Jaron has. This is a secret he's kept for a very long time. He didn't even inform his brother that he was gay until last summer. So much for twin telepathy. And some people are likening this to the announcement, likening this announcement to Jackie Robinson, who was the first African-American baseball player to play in Major League Baseball in the modern era. Now, I actually think that there are similarities in terms of the impact. The key difference for me is that, for the most part, in most cases, you can tell when someone is black by looking at them. And as we know here, and as really has been the focus of a lot of the discussion around gay and lesbian athletes in team sports, you can't tell who is in the locker room with you. And that, will, as we'll get to when we look at the criticisms, that's actually a factor in the criticisms, but different in that way, but just as, along the same lines in terms of what it means.
Of course, yeah.
NBA Commissioner David Stern said that Collins, the 34-year-old veteran, is widely respected in the league. He said, we are proud he has assumed the leadership mantle on this very important issue. Boston Celtics head coach Doc Rivers said Collins is a pro's pro and one of the favorite players he has ever coached. Going on to say, if you have learned anything from Jackie Robinson, it is that teammates are always the first to accept. It will be society who has to learn tolerance. And President Obama called Collins to express his support, and he said he was impressed by his courage. And today, actually, even after President Obama ended kind of officially the press conference he did this morning, somebody yelling, hey, do you want to comment on Jason Collins? And he said, yeah, actually, I will. And he actually spoke for a few minutes about it and saying that it is important. This is very important. And again, even if you don't care about sports specifically, think about kids, right? Kids who maybe don't play team sports when they're in high school because they don't see that there are out gay athletes in pro sports. Now they see this and they see what has been overall very, very positive reaction. This can have a real effect, right, Natan? The idea that this is just, oh, we make an announcement and everybody's happy except for a few people and it's all blah, blah. This has a very important effect.
Yeah, I think it's both an example of how much progress has been made and something that's going to catalyze even more progress, above and beyond the world of sports. Obviously, it seems less likely that we're going to see this very soon in the NFL potentially, but at some point it's going to happen there too.
Yep.
And it's going to be normalized. In 10 to 20 years, this will look like ancient history, I think.
My question is, what will be the reaction once we know what is obvious, right? That there are gay athletes in all major sports. What will happen to kind of the stereotypical tough guy NFL fans, right? If they know that, hey, there's a player that maybe you're a fan of on the team you support who's gay. Do you not like the sport as much? Do you have what happens, Lewis? I mean, I'm fascinated to see what happens.
Well, I mean, what your implication is that tough guy football fans are all homophobic?
No, not that they all are, but I'm wondering for the ones that are.
I think the majority of fans won't care. I think there will be a handful who, if they realize that their favorite player is gay and they are or were homophobic, they'll say, hey, well, maybe it's not so bad. And then I'm sure there are some that will just find a new player to like.
No, I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
Everything okay back there in the town?
What do you mean?
No, just everything's working fine?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Good, very good. Not all reaction to Jason Collins' announcement was positive. There was a lot of negative as well. Obviously, online comments, posts, Facebook, blog posts, all that stuff. And I'm going to give you two specific examples. One is ESPN basketball analyst Chris Broussard, who went on a little bit of a mini rant saying, the Bible calls homosexuality a sin, and this is a sin. That's the reality of the situation. It is like many other sins. Of course, we've heard this before. This is on ESPN. Take a listen to this.
Personally, I don't believe that you can live an openly homosexual lifestyle or an openly premarital sex between heterosexuals. If you're openly living that type of lifestyle, then the Bible says you know them by their fruits. It says that, that's a sin.
Right.
And if you're openly living in unrepentant sin, whatever it may be, not just homosexuality, adultery, fornication, premarital sex between heterosexuals, whatever it may be, I believe that's walking in open rebellion to God and to Jesus Christ. So I would not characterize that person as a Christian because I don't think the Bible would characterize him as a Christian.
Interestingly enough, also anybody who commits violence who happens to be Christian, they're also not true Christians, as we've seen many, many times, Lewis. Now, there was a statement that was released. There were a number of statements that came after this. Okay, number one is that Broussard himself put out a statement saying, listen, I was offering my personal opinion as it relates to Christianity. Those beliefs don't impact, and they have never impacted my ability to report on the NBA. Then the ESPN basically dismissed the comments as a distraction. Yes, ESPN did. The NBA did not comment on these comments, saying, we regret that a respectful discussion of personal viewpoints became a distraction from today's news. ESPN is fully committed to diversity and welcomes Jason Collins' announcement. Now, I have to say, I don't believe that there was anything respectful about Broussard's contributions to the discussion, right? I mean, his anti-gay views were the opposite of a distraction to me. To me, how people respond to a gay player is at the heart of this announcement. And I don't consider his comments a distraction. I consider the fact that this was his reaction important.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, on the scale of insulting and disrespectful, I would say this is pretty mild. I wouldn't say that this is even in the same ballpark as some of the people we interview on this show.
Well, okay, he's not saying gay people should be put to death. He's not saying he shouldn't be allowed to be on the team. He's not saying he personally hates people that are gay. He is kind of doing the thing
he basically just says the Bible says this is a sin, so I think it's a sin.
Where he's doing the thing which is cowardly in one way, which is to stand behind a so-called sacred text and to say, listen, it's not my view. It's just what the Bible says, and I think that that's pretty pathetic.
Well, it's one of two things. It's cowardly or it's just stupid/ignorant.
Right.
We don't know which one. I mean, neither of those is a good thing, but one or the other.
So then Brian Fisher, who we know is anti-gay and has been a guest on this show, says, you really shouldn't sign Jason Collins to your team. He's going to eyeball your teammates in the shower, and that would not be good. Here's Brian Fisher.
Stanford team to go to the Final Four. He has come out today and said he's gay. And this is in Sports Illustrated. He's the first professional athlete currently playing who came out while his career was still in progress. Some have come out after their careers are over. And the question on the heading of the SI.com piece is why NBA center Jason Collins is coming out now. Well, the answer is easy. It's the end of the season. Season's over.
Well, that's true.
Now they've got an entire offseason to figure out what they are going to do about this next year. Now, I will guarantee you if the ownership of whatever team is thinking about bringing him back or thinking about trading for him, and they go to the players on that team and they say, how do you feel about an active homosexual being in the same locker room, sharing the same shower facilities with you? They say, no way. I don't want that. I do not want some guy, a teammate, eyeballing me in the shower, and my wife does not want that.
Yeah, the wife, I'm sure, is really, really worried about it. I would love to meet the wives of players who are really worried about that.
If his wife is worried about that, There's something else going on.
Yeah, if players' wives are worried about them being around a gay guy, they probably are having concerns about whether they're in a real marriage with their husband or not. That would be the question. But this is such an absurd argument, right? Because along these lines, listen, you shouldn't have, if you're a man, you simply could not have, if you have to have surgery done, you should not have a gay doctor perform the surgery because, listen, you're lying there, you're under anesthesia, you're unconscious, and who knows what that doctor might do. I mean, after all, he's attracted to men in his personal life, and there would be no way he could possibly separate that from the fact that he's doing a medical procedure. This is the height of assuming people just are completely immature. Right? I mean, it's the dumbest argument I've heard that because he might be eyeballing people, you just can't have him in the locker room, Lewis. It's risky.
Well, I think a lot of what's going through the head of homophobes is that somehow homosexuals are more deviant than your average human being.
Right.
They think that because you're homosexual, you're prone to so many other crazy things.
Of course.
That heteros are just not that susceptible to.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on, and it's pretty pathetic. And I'm curious to see what happens. Now, the thing is, will he find a team? He is a free agent now. Will he find a team to play on? And there will probably be some PR benefit to the team that does sign him. And I think it'll be interesting to follow this story. But then again, as more players come out, this is going to become less and less of a story, and that's a good thing. That's how it should be.
Right.
Horrible story out of South Africa. 3 so-called, and I use this term only because this is the way it's being discussed in the story, 3 so-called gay and effeminate teens have died after being starved, tortured, and killed at a camp that promised to turn them into men. There are pictures which you can find of Raymond Bees, 15 years old, taken a couple of years ago, and they show this skeletal, emaciated figure fighting for his life. And 10 weeks prior to that, the parents had signed him up to the Echo Wild Game Rangers. This is a training course in South Africa. At the time, he was in perfect health. In the hospital, he was malnourished. He was dehydrated. His arm was broken in 2 places. There were burns and wounds all over his body. He lay in intensive care for 4 weeks until he died. And now, the general of this training course, Alex de Koker, 49 years old, and an employee, Michael Erasmus, 20 years old, are on trial for charges of murder, as they should be, as well as child abuse and neglect, along with 2 cases of assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm in relation to the death of this individual. Now, the teen's death is alleged to have been the 3rd among the Afrikaans children who attended the $2,400 course. These courses have been advertised since back in 2006. And this is Bui's mother said, "I sent my son on this course to make him a better man, to give him a better future. I trusted Alex de Koker with his life. And the claims from the individual, Gerard Oosthuizen, who shared a tent with Bui's, says that Bui's was chained to his bed every night. He was refused permission to go to the bathroom. He was forced to eat his own excrement. This is torture at the highest level. And the crazy thing is that these are not the first allegations that this was going on at this training camp. There were allegations that predate this from 4 years earlier of 2 other individuals who also died while at this training camp. The allegations were, well, they died for other reasons. It was a heart attack, and then another one died from, actually both allegedly dying of a heart attack, and then it turns out one died from a seizure, dehydration, and he was bleeding from the brain, and the other appeared to have been choked with a seatbelt. Disgusting story, and so many questions. Why would the parents send their child to this after there were pre-existing cases? Why didn't the individual lose his license for his torture chamber the first time somebody died there? A lot of questions that are unanswered right now.
I don't even know where to begin. This is such an insane story. I literally can't even wrap my head around it.
It just doesn't make any sense. And
Right.
It's hard to even comment because there are just so many obvious questions here that it just makes absolutely no sense. I just don't even know where to go with this. What's clear is that these individuals hopefully will be found guilty here, assuming that all the evidence is true. There's a lot of evidence. These are some of the lowest of the low. And if their objections to homosexuality are religious, if they are, we don't know, how could they possibly believe that this behavior is the way to get to heaven? Even the most perverted view of the Bible if that is what matters to them, which has no bearing legally, of course, I couldn't find any way to argue that the Bible suggests treating these individuals this way is the way to get to heaven.
No. But like we talk about, people make their own interpretations.
Absolutely. A mother who persuaded her adopted teenage daughter to become pregnant by artificial insemination because she wanted a baby for herself has been jailed for 5 years in Britain. This is a case that is bringing up questions about, number one, how easily donor sperm can be obtained, but number two, a lot of questions about adoption as well. There are some previously secret court documents which showed that the daughter, a virgin, was forced to inseminate herself alone in her bedroom 7 times over a 2-year period, starting in 2008 when she was 14 years old, using syringes of semen bought online by the mother from a sperm bank Cryos in Denmark. She eventually became pregnant 7 times, Lewis, eventually became pregnant 2 years later at 16, gave birth at 17. And the circumstances here came to light after midwives noticed the mom was acting really suspicious. Like, for example, a midwife said, well, we should start breastfeeding. And the mother saying, no, we don't want her to be too attached to the new baby. That obviously raising a red flag. And eventually this all led to this case of this just insane abuse situation. Horrific.
Right. And we've heard stories about abuse among adopted kids and their, well, what are the term for the parents?
Adoptive parents.
The adoptive parents, yeah. But this one is certainly taking it to another level.
How is this only a 5-year sentence, right? I mean, isn't this a kind of slavery, using a person for forced surrogate reproduction? This is forced surrogacy. This individual, this daughter, this adopted daughter, was essentially a slave to this woman, being forced to carry a child she wanted for whatever sick motivations fed her desire to have yet another adopted kid. This seems like slavery, and 5 years seems like too light of a sentence to me.
It's a joke.
Unbelievable. On today's bonus show, we will talk about kind of an interesting story. Sex contracts growing in popularity. Has Lewis ever been a party to one of these contracts? We will find that out on the bonus show. Also, the ponytail zipliner stuntman has died. If you haven't heard about him, we'll talk to you about that. And also a pizza maker shortage in Italy. DavidPakman.com/membership is how you sign up. Now, I'm going to reveal this, Lewis, if I may. Tomorrow, we are going to be launching a David Pakman Show membership special where you can get a free David Pakman Show bumper sticker, which I have here in 2 different colors. These have been custom made for our Indiegogo fundraiser. We have some left over, which we will offer for free to new members. I'm going to tell you how to get this. And also a free Barack Obama 1,000-piece puzzle. These things are great, Lewis. I love a good puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done one in probably 15 years, but I did enjoy it back then.
I'm working on one now with my little sister, actually, a 500-piece. Anyway, 1,000-piece puzzle courtesy of the We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama Facebook page. How do you get this stuff for free? It's very easy. You go to davidpakman.com/May13, May 13. This is going on for just a week. It starts tomorrow officially, but you can get it today. And if you want, we've got a great deal on a David Pakman Show t-shirt as well, all at davidpakman.com/May13. Check it out. We'll be back after this with plenty more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Of course, our membership program, the #1 funding source for the show, is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Some statistics suggest that the economy is improving despite having a liberal president, but the statistics themselves obviously have a liberal bias. Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day, Jason Gustafson. Jason, thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for supporting this program like so many other David Pakman Show members are doing. And you can find out more about the new May 2013 membership special 1 day early, giving away 2 things: bumper stickers and a President Obama 1,000-piece puzzle. Both of these items for free with a 1-year membership, but you have to go to davidpakman.com/May13, May13. How many of these specials are you going to pick up, Lewis?
20 or 30,000.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Today in show history, what were we talking about years ago on the David Pakman Show? 1 year ago today, we were talking about, even though President Obama had just recently paid off his student loans, Mitt Romney suggested that people just borrow money from their parents to go to school or to start a business. And that really showed, that was like the beginning indicator of how out of touch with reality he really was. And of course, in the campaign that followed, he turned out to be incredibly out of touch.
Yeah, so out of touch he couldn't even be coached by a campaign staff and, to come back down to reality or even fake it. He couldn't even fake it. He couldn't even fake.
He couldn't even act like he was remotely connected to the way most people live.
Right.
Yeah. 2 years ago today, Barack Obama provided his birth certificate, and he put out a public statement about it. I said it was a big mistake, and we talked about, of course, how immediately people would come up with theories about how the birth certificate itself was a fraud, and as we saw, that did happen. That was
right.
2 years ago today. And 4 years ago today, Senator Joe Lieberman suggested we not worry about anything the Bush administration may have done with regard to torture because a few years have already passed. It's kind of like ancient history. Let's focus on the future. Joe Lieberman's idea 4 years ago today.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Sandra Day O'Connor, former Supreme Court justice, said that, you know what? Maybe the Supreme Court never should have even taken up Bush v. Gore in 2000, which eventually led to George W. Bush becoming president of the U.S. Can you imagine this? This is, first let me tell you exactly what she said. She said, maybe the court should have said, we're not going to take it. Goodbye. It turned out the election authorities in Florida hadn't done a real good job and kind of messed it up. And probably the Supreme Court added to the problem at the end of the day. Think about that for a second, ladies and gentlemen. Sandra Day O'Connor, who was on the court when Bush v. Gore was decided, basically admits that the biggest decision rendered while she was on the court, provided and she provided a vote towards, got it wrong, and swung a presidential election. You know, perhaps it would have been a different situation if George W. Bush had won the popular vote and had actually clearly won in Florida, and there was a sense that the Supreme Court was really just kind of ending a recount that was not going to change anything. That was not the case. And we have an admission from a former Supreme Court justice that maybe the Supreme Court never should have even gotten involved. Unbelievable. Do you understand those comments? Do you understand how different history may have been had the Supreme Court not ever taken that up?
But were these her thoughts at the time? I doubt it.
Well, that's the question, right? Natan, why did she now come to this decision? Did she always think this?
Well,
but it would have been a disaster if she had said it? Or has she learned something new? Has she had an epiphany?
Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she's worried about her legacy in the history books. I was just going to point out that if the recount that was going on when the Supreme Court stopped it had continued, it's very likely that Gore would have lost because it was only recounting parts of the state and also because a lot of the votes that had been thrown out wouldn't have been able to be recounted. However, studies have shown that if everyone had had their intent counted, Gore probably would have won. But I just want to point out that the recount probably wasn't going to end up in Gore's favor anyway.
It's not total. But so you're saying that if we looked at those errant ballots where the lines were drawn all over, like that butterfly ballot, if the intent of those had properly been counted, Gore would have won.
Yeah, because in a lot of those cases, like the butterfly ballot, people just voted for someone else, so there's no way to recount it to count the original intent. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
No.
Did you want to say something, Lois?
No, not really.
You're bewildered.
I wouldn't say bewildered, but it's certainly a strange time to come out and say this.
It is. Mark Sanford, who you remember went down to Argentina, even though he claimed he was hiking the Appalachians to visit his mistress, he is now running for the South Carolina House of Representatives. In other words, U.S. House representing South Carolina against Stephen Colbert's sister, Elizabeth Colbert Bush. Or I guess she's going by Colbert. I'm not sure how she's pronouncing it, Natan.
I think she's saying Colbert Bush.
Yeah.
She's not doing that fake French thing that Stephen does.
In any case, she actually kind of alluded to when talking about proper kind of like fiscal responsibility, financial responsibility as an elected official, she alluded to when former Governor Mark Sanford was down in Argentina and misusing government funds and visiting his mistress. And Mark Sanford does a really bad job of just pretending he didn't hear it and he has no idea what anybody's talking about. And I'm going to warn you, it gets pretty damn awkward because nobody's buying this line that he just didn't hear it. It is pretty compelling video. Take a look at this.
We talk about fiscal spending and we talk about protecting the taxpayers. It doesn't mean you take that money we saved and leave the country for a personal purpose.
Here we go. I love this.
She went there, Governor Sanford.
I couldn't hear what she said. Repeat it. I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
Answer the question.
What was the question? Okay, but anyway, on the sequester, I mean, I'll go back to the sequester. Here's the
Yeah,
problem.
let's talk about the sequester. So anyway,
Hold on. There really wasn't a question. It was just a statement. She was saying, hey, isn't it ridiculous that you're preaching fiscal conservatism and you spent taxpayer money to go overseas for a ridiculous trip?
That's
not really a question.
It
It's
kind
more
of
just
is.
a comment.
It's kind of like defend what you did. If you believe, is that when you talk about being fiscally responsible, is that an example of it, or do you now agree that that's not an example of it?
Implicitly, there's a question.
Yeah, but it's just the fact that he claims he didn't hear it is hilarious, Lewis.
Maybe he didn't.
Everybody knows what she was asking.
Yeah, he heard it.
Sanford trails Colbert Bush by as much as 9 points in recent polls, although some say she didn't do that well in this particular debate, and we'll have to see what the effect is on the polls.
I bet if she keeps dropping that bomb, she'll just maintain a steady lead.
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear that.
Very good. Yeah.
Could you
Answer the question.
Answer the question. I love it. Aren't there some other examples of this that we covered recently where the person just basically, when they got into a tough spot, acted like
Schwarzenegger, when he was running for governor of California the first time, he was like via satellite on, with, I don't know if it was Matt Lauer or one of those shows, and he claimed not to hear what he was being asked. But then later in his book, he admitted that he actually could hear him fine. He just didn't have an answer because he wasn't prepared.
That's right. That's absolutely. I do remember that. Pretty clever stuff. Mark Sanford not fooling anybody, though, I have to say.
Not at all.
Let's take a break. I want to come back and talk about the first. Remember the ag gag, Lewis?
Yeah.
You do. Okay, it's not some weird sexual position. This is actually a serious thing.
Yeah.
We now may have the first prosecution under that. It's pretty serious stuff. We'll come back and talk about that. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the show. A couple months ago, we talked about this legislation that was being put in place, much to the joy of big slaughterhouses and big agricultural companies, which would make it illegal to do undercover videos of anything from slaughterhouses. We got quite a picture there. I like that. We can see that very, very clearly. Everything from slaughterhouses to other kind of food-related locations, right, Lewis? And this was obvious. The goal was obvious. The conditions are so bad there that we want to criminalize and scare people from ever trying to sneak in and get any video of what we're doing. Very, very clear what was going on.
Right.
We knew all the kind of regular players who were supporting it. Okay. So we are now seeing the first potential. Well, we are seeing the first prosecution. We will see if there is a conviction for these ag-gag laws. Amy Meyer may be the first person charged under the 2012 law. She was horrified by what she saw at a Draper slaughterhouse, and she decided to film it. This is in Utah, a Utah slaughterhouse in Draper. 25 years old. She's now facing a Class B misdemeanor for agricultural Operation Interference. Prosecutors filed the charge in Draper's court after Meyer reportedly used her cell phone to film the Dale T. Smith & Sons meatpacking company. Okay? So Class B misdemeanors carry up to 6 months in jail. Meyer has pleaded not guilty to the charge. Her next court appearance is on May 23rd, and she is free pending the trial. So there was a written statement sent to the Salt Lake Tribune, and Meyer explains she went to the slaughterhouse because she heard bystanders on public property were able to, without going onto the property of the slaughterhouse, witness the horror of cows struggling for their lives while being led to their violent deaths. That's a quote. Her defense attorney, Stuart Gollin, says that Meyer was standing on public property. She used her cell phone to capture video, and that she has absolutely not trespassed or broken any laws here. And in her statement, Meyer actually describes a pretty horrific scene, which is not uncommon, right? Piles of horns, flesh coming out of a chute, cows turning around because they're horrified. And the real issue here is if you're standing outside the grounds, Lewis, are you really breaking any laws? You're standing in public. What's the big deal?
I mean, I would assume that if you're on public property, there's, no harm, no foul.
We're going to see what happens.
Yeah.
It's unclear what's going to happen, but it is horrific. A New York dad's pistol license has been suspended over something his 10-year-old son said in school. His son joking around about having a paint gun and a water gun and a BB gun, etc. And this got back to the police, the principal reporting it to the police, and the police deciding to take away the father's pistol permit because his son joked after some kind of scuffle about a paintball gun and a BB gun. What's your thought?
It doesn't really make sense. I mean, obviously we're all on the show. We're all pro-gun regulation.
Right.
But, I mean, what's going on here?
Natan, what do you think?
I'll let you comment first because I'm not sure what I think about this.
Based on what I know, which is that the kid. So here's the thing. The question is, do you believe that a kid saying, I am angry with you and I want to bring a BB gun here, does that mean that the kid would actually go get his dad's gun, bring it to school, loaded? Do we know how accessible it is? Do we know any of those things? Do we believe that it's a real threat or not?
So what you're saying is, does the kid think his dad's real gun is a BB gun?
I believe from the information that we have public, there is no evidence that the kid really had an intent to find and take his dad's gun, nor do we have evidence that he even would have been able to do that. Is the gun in a safe? Is it locked? And while I am a supporter of gun safety laws, strict gun safety laws, if the father was not breaking a law and the gun was in a safe, and realistically there was no way the kid was going to get that gun and bring it to school, I don't see this as reasonable. However, if there was contrary evidence to that, then I might change my mind, Natan.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the dad should be held responsible if he really has the gun, totally secured. On the other hand, if it's a legitimate threat, then it sounds like something different or above and beyond this should be done to, figure out what's going on with this kid. It might have nothing to do with law enforcement, but something seems to need to be done.
To also add one more bit of data to the story, the police department had previously confirmed that the individual's pistol license was suspended, but the spokesperson then clarified, saying there has been kind of like an initial suspension, but no final agency determination has been made. So maybe upon review, they will find out these questions, which are, could the kid even really get the gun? Is the gun locked up in a safe? And maybe if the answer to those questions is one that makes it clear the kid doesn't really have access to the gun, then they say, we're not going to suspend it.
This is kind of crazy. I mean, it's a 10-year-old kid. They say ridiculous things. And if the kid were older, if the kid were 18, well, then the dad wouldn't be held accountable at all, would he? Because he'd no longer be a minor. So
that's true.
It's kind of silly.
Interesting story out of Syria. Missiles targeted a Russian passenger plane over Syria. There were unidentified assailants that fired 2 land-to-air missiles at a Russian passenger plane carrying about 200 people when it flew over Syria yesterday. And the Interfax news agency reported this. They cited an informed source in Russia. We have a couple of quotes here. The Syrian side informed us that on Monday morning, unidentified people had fired 2 land-to-air missiles which exploded in the immediate proximity of a civilian plane belonging to a Russian airline. The crew has been able to move the aircraft to the side on time we're probably dealing with some kind of translation here that is not perfect.
Yeah.
The crew has been able to move the aircraft to the side on time and save the lives of the passengers. Nobody was hurt, according to the report. The targeted plane belongs to Nordwind Airlines, which is a charter air carrier in Russia. And this is according to the Russian Federal Agency for Tourism. Wow. I mean, what's your reaction to this? I've had some situations on planes that didn't make me feel particularly comfortable, but this is another level altogether.
Yeah, well, I really doubt it was those were government missiles or military missiles, because presumably rebels aren't flying massive planes around, right? So I don't know. I guess it's just in the state of paranoia. They're firing missiles at what they think are dangerous military aircraft.
I actually think that, well, I don't necessarily think that, but I often wondered, what could it take for me to say I just can't fly anymore? I know people who have had experiences on airplanes, like, for example, where even though there wasn't really much of an emergency, in the midst of a very turbulent situation, the oxygen masks came down and the plane landed safely. But that made it so that they just aren't flying anymore. And you hear different stories of different people. Would something like this, how would this affect you?
Well, it's pretty rare that you're flying over a war zone, and even more rare that you're flying over one where the combatants have capabilities like this.
Right.
I guess from now on, maybe I'll just think to myself, okay, what countries is this plane flying over?
Yeah, so something like this, even if this happened to you, like let's say you were on this and it happened to you, you wouldn't stop flying. You would just say, I'm not going to take any flights that would go near there.
Right. I think I would be inconveniencing myself too much if I decided not to fly anymore.
All right. Natan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would do the same. I would just, try to find out as much as possible as to the specific route that the plane I'm going on is taking. But I don't think, with plane travel, it's kind of out of your control. But there's always a chance that something's going to go wrong. It's a small chance. In this case, it's a little bit different only because of what Lewis says. You can kind of maybe not go over Syria and get to the place you're going.
Right. All right. There you go. Please join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We'll take our final break. We'll come back. Sweden has adopted a gender-neutral pronoun. We'll talk about that and its implications. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the show. Great to see everybody from the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page and the Too Informed to Vote Republican Facebook page. Check out both of those. Sweden has adopted a gender-neutral pronoun. So in the same way that in English we say he or she, in Swedish they have that. And they've added a new pronoun which allows people to refer to others without referring to their gender. It is hen. So, for example, I could say, oh, I really like my professor. Hen gives really great notes or whatever, right? And from when I say hen instead of he or she, you wouldn't be able to tell whether I'm talking about a male or a female professor. Now, there's kind of two aspects to this. One aspect is it useful for referring to people who themselves have identified as being, I don't know,
genderless,
gender ambiguous, whatever the term may be, and it allows you to be able to refer to them without saying he or she. A separate question is whether it's just better for society overall to use gender-neutral pronouns when referring to people. To that, I don't actually think that really should be the goal of having a gender-neutral pronoun. I have a friend who worked somewhere before, and she used to tell me that there was an employee who on certain days was gender ambiguous, and on certain days would go by a male name and would want everybody to use the male pronoun. And on some days would decide that they were the female name and they would want the female pronoun. Now, putting aside whether that's even a realistic and logical and reasonable thing to expect at a place of work, this particular situation could have resolved that, right? Which is regardless of what day it is, you can use the gender-neutral pronoun. Now, putting that aside, if we look at Sweden specifically, when it comes to gender neutrality, it is one of the most progressive countries, right? Highest percentage of working women. The Swedish Bowling Association is going towards having men and women compete in the same events. I mean, there's no physical contact where men having a larger stature or heavier builds would give them an advantage when it comes to bowling. And clothing stores sometimes don't have male and female attire. They're just gender-neutral clothing stores, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, do we need total gender neutrality to have equality? I believe that you don't. In fact, if we take the idea of total gender neutrality to its full conclusion, we would get a situation where we essentially have an androgynous culture. And what I think is best is a situation where we have ways for individuals who identify as gender ambiguous, gender neutral, whatever it is that they consider themselves, for them to comfortably fit into society in those ways and, of course, not be discriminated against. But without, gender identity to a lot of people is something that they like and consider to be an important part of their life. So I believe that we don't need total neutrality to have equality. Lewis, agree, disagree?
Agree.
You agree?
Agree.
Natan, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I agree. I guess it depends on how you define neutrality. I remember reading a while back, this British guy was saying that in Germany he was there, and I guess there's a slightly more neutral in the way you're defining it view towards sex and the separation of the sexes. And he was like in a gym locker room, and he was like completely naked, about to put his clothes on, and he turns around and he sees this female like janitor just like right next to him. And she just, didn't think anything of it because she does it all the time. And he was like very embarrassed, obviously.
Right.
Now, I don't know if this is that common in Germany or not, but you can certainly imagine what that would be like applied to everything. And yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily feasible or a good thing, but I certainly don't think it's necessary to have equality.
Certainly not. So I think we agree on that. Do you agree? Do we need total gender neutrality to have true gender equality? I believe we don't.
Right.
Send me your thoughts. Call our voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. Our voicemail line is open 24 hours a day. Here is a voicemail from Noel about Rush Limbaugh talking about the, innocentization of the Boston Marathon bombing suspect by showing pictures of him when he is young. I mean, let's be honest, he's still young. Here's what Noel had to say.
Hi, guys. This is Noel in Georgia. Just listened to your show where you played the bit of Rush Limbaugh comparing the Boston Marathon bomber to Trayvon Martin. And maybe you guys are taking the high road, but didn't Rush Limbaugh sound really creepy to you? Like maybe he was really, really interested in the young pictures of the Boston Marathon bomber? I just found that whole thing quite odd. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay, I have to say I did notice this, but because people reacted negatively when I said that this anti-gay guy, his moans of disgust sounded kind of like he was turned on, clearly joking. People didn't like that, so I just figured I won't mention that about Limbaugh. But yes, I did notice that.
I noticed it too, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if we learned anything regarding that type of thing about Limbaugh.
Nothing would surprise you at this point.
From him, no.
All right, and here's a voicemail about the masturbating Korean teacher who, after beating a student, started feverishly masturbating in the hallway on camera while people yelled and were completely appalled. Here it is.
Yo, David P. It's Patty D. from Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Just saw your segment about the Korean teacher and that whole incident. And my sister's also in South Korea teaching right now, so I forwarded her your segment and asked if she heard about it, and sure enough, she did read it in the paper. And I guess what's brewing in the streets there, or a theory, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to say, is that he maybe had a stroke or some other type of thing that might be related to the mind that can make you go out in the hallway. And
yeah, I mean, it sounds like just idle speculation. We've heard about all sorts of stuff happening when people have strokes. They learn other languages. They speak in certain accents. They all of a sudden become incredible pianists or painters or whatever the case may be. I've not heard of a time where a stroke makes you beat a student and then masturbate.
I think it could happen.
It could happen, but it would just be weird to have no other visible side effects or need a medical intervention. I don't know. I mean, okay, I guess it's speculation. We're hearing kind of, I guess, secondhand, not thirdhand, from South Korea. But, well, the audience is hearing it now thirdhand from me. But
right.
And anyway, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. They said mental illness was not an apparent issue. A stroke, I guess, could explain that. Right. Could explain how they know that. All right. davidpakman.com/membership to become a David Pakman Show member. 1 day early. davidpakman.com/May13. You get a free Obama puzzle and David Pakman Show bumper sticker with your membership. Check it out. It's fantastic stuff. We'll see you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.